Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. Thanks, Ben, for the introduction. I am the sustainability manager for Douglas County. As Ben mentioned, our office is a little bit more than 10 years old, and we had been originally a joint city-county venture. So we had one director that was working both for the city and the county, and then we're able to bring on some new staff through some various grant ventures, largely in food systems, where we do a lot of work. When our previous director left at the end of 2021, the city and county decided, this might be a really good opportunity to experiment with what two different offices look like. And I think that was so smart because, in the 10 years that they'd been working, they were starting to develop different priorities. The city was working on their strategic plan at the time, and that has, one of their 6 commitment areas is with environmental sustainability. So they were really wanting a lot of dedication in that area. In the meantime, the county, doing a lot of work in food systems, as I mentioned, really wanting to develop this open space plan. And so moving into some priorities in our rural and unincorporated areas. And so having our resources reallocated, I still meet with the city director on a weekly basis. Like we're very, very collaborative, but having our resources reallocated, I think, has been really helpful for us to explore different priorities that, as Ben said, complement, but can grow more when we can be more focused. So I've been with the county for three and a half years now. I actually did start in food systems work there. And so I'm happy to have grown that into the manager position. I see myself, and I'm going to tell you obviously more about this project, but I have a broad-based knowledge in resilience thinking and systems thinking and sustainability lens on problem solving. I'm not an ecologist, so I see myself as a manager and a convener on this program, but not necessarily the subject expert. And so, there may be questions in your mind as I'm talking that you may actually have some of the answers to. And that's why I'm really excited to be here to try to mine some of the expertise and community input that we're going to need on this plan that we're diving into. So some of you may or may not be familiar with Plan 2040, which is the updated comprehensive plan for Douglas County and City of Lawrence. In that plan, which was adopted in 2019, the county called for the development of an open space plan, which is, that's my slide here, essentially a vision and a guide for decision makers about how unincorporated land will be used into the future. So
maybe we should check that.
Oh,
This side thing.
Yep, if you know how. Probably done this a lot more than me.
Looks better?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I think we're like almost 100 slides.
So we are taking a very wide and open-minded lens on what undeveloped means for this plan. So, values for land in our county could include conservation of ecologically sensitive areas, recreation, agriculture, cultural history, rural significance, and climate adaptation. So, and we have gone, we've actually partnered with a consultant firm out of Colorado called Logan Simpson to help us with the development of this. That's part of kind of bringing in the resources to build up our team here. And one of the reasons that we felt like they were such a good fit is because they have taken such a wide lens on land uses. They've done agricultural plans, they've done recreation plans, and we want to be open-minded to what the citizens of Douglas County are interested in seeing into our land in the future. Part of the urgency of this plan comes out of, as you can imagine, some development pressures. the commission is, making decisions with values that were written into Plan 2040, but having a guide just dedicated to how land decisions are made is going to be really helpful to them. And so we're going to be seeking a wide amount of community input into this plan. Let's see, actually, let me back up for a minute. So in terms of, I mentioned resources of people behind this. The team that is working toward this plan is made up of myself in the sustainability office, zoning and codes at the county, knowing a lot about land use in our rural areas. Also heritage conservation. So Patty Beatles has been helping us from the Heritage Conservation Council with her input, and then the new permanent staff member who's coming on to that team will be helping us in the future. And we will have a diverse advisory board as well that's helping us to kind of guide us and give their perspective and input. In terms of other resources behind this, we did receive funding in 2020 before the pandemic, right after the comprehensive plan was passed, and we were like, we're going to do this now, and we got funding from a program called Partners for Places, which literally is intended to bring people together over shared places. And so it was a really great fit. And that funder has been so gracious in letting us can hold on to that funding, well beyond what a project period was supposed to be pre-pandemic. We also have $2.7 million that was granted, or rather allocated by the county from ARPA funds, American Recovery funds. So, and that is for implementation. So we have that into the next 4 years. So as this plan develops and we see opportunities for conservation easements, acquisition, restoration, we have some resources behind that. So as I have, kind of read through my dialogue here, we're really hoping that this plan is going to be informed by what our community would like to see into the future. We don't want to be the decision makers about how the land will be preserved. And this may be, something that the county takes on to acquire and manage, or it may be working with a private landowner who wants to conserve their land. We had the great privilege as a team to go out and walk on a private landowner's property who had built a trail and created these wonderful hand-carved signs, and just because they wanted to share that resource with the community. And so that could be the type of partnerships that we're developing through this process, and then obviously with landowner permission, sharing that knowledge with the community. So this is not necessarily to pass new codes or new regulations, but to guide decision making. We do have some funding earmarked in that ARPA fund that I mentioned if we need to do any new land studies, but we know that we have some rich GIS layers and the natural resource inventory done by KBS. So we'll be relying on those items, but if there becomes an opportunity to mine new data, we do have some funding to do that as well. And again, I mentioned that our staff will be, highly relying on the guidance of an advisory committee, which I'll go back to these slides in a minute. Invitations are being sent out for this advisory committee very early in the process. We do want their input and engagement on some of the tools that we're going to use this spring and summer to gain community input. So I don't have a firm list of organizations represented, but this is a sample of some of the perspectives that we hope to have in our process. So I just want to go back to a timeline. I didn't want to rely too heavily on the slides. Actually, I'm going to get to conversation in just a minute. So just getting started. We just had our kickoff meeting. I don't know if anyone was able to listen. And if you didn't, there is a recording. We just had a kickoff meeting with some of the same content. I'm giving you some more detailed information. Kickoff meeting with the county commission on Wednesday night to launch this process. So we are and truly just getting started. We will plan to be doing some engagement into the summer, which includes a variety of just multi-communication techniques, everything from a hotline people can call and listen, because we know that some of our rural areas don't have good internet access, to more technology-driven surveys and things like that. And the communications folks that we're working with on this had a really cool idea of having kind of like a community fair. So rather than a presentation where people come and, maybe we do some table talking and things like that, which, can be very effective, having more like booths where people can walk around and either share a story or gain information about something that they're interested in. So kind of having it very interactive that way. So we think that could be kind of exciting to experiment with. So here are some of some of the tools that we're using: the hotline, doing a mailer, because we know that, again, some of our rural folks who we are, want to engage in this process because they may, maybe neighbors or maybe the landowners of some of this, beautiful land that we're talking about. And then, having a photo contest where people can submit photos of their favorite places in Douglas County, which we think will be really compelling and engaging. And then as we kind of drill down into our engagement toward the end, we've talked about having focus groups as some concerns or priorities or groups emerge, then drilling down and having some more focused conversations with those guys. Yeah, so I don't know, like I said, we're kind of just kicking off. So with that, I just want to, I'm just here to have a conversation. And so see what questions you guys have, or ideas.
But we'll clap and then we'll. So I will try and monitor this, but I would open it to anybody that just has questions about open spaces or county planning.
Years ago, I remember there was an effort to try to balance land set aside for sort of industrial development with open space land, basically arranging a 1-to-1 ratio. Has that vanished, or is that still a possibility?
So what I believe you're talking about is the eco squared effort.
Yeah.
So 10 or more years ago, there was some community outreach done that it was exactly to the tune of what you're saying, Dr. Hagan, of feeling a threat of industrialization and wanting to preserve land alongside that. So that input is not lost. It is certainly something that we have in hand and we can build on. But what staff understand from the process is there was some really rich information that was gained, but not a sustainable way to implement it. And so we don't want that to happen with this. And so part of what we are asking our consultant to provide us is what's next? How do we secure funding to keep this going? What's the program that the county needs to maintain, whether it's land that they manage or how they work with landowners on conservation easements, et cetera. So we learned from that process. We have the valuable information and also the lessons learned. Yes.
Email list or something like that, or how can we just make sure that everyone stay advised of what's going on?
So the question for Zoom was how does this group gathered today, as well as KBS, stay involved in the process or stay up to date? And I have a couple answers. One is an invitation has been extended directly to KBS to participate in the, can I say that?
Yeah.
To participate in the advisory committees, and that has been accepted.
Yeah.
So we'll have a direct line to KBS and the advisory committee.
So the company.
Yes. Yes.
Who is at this point not being named.
Oh, I
For
don't.
some reason, Kelly Kincher has.
Okay, thank
accepted
you.
that position.
Thank you, Patty. I didn't know. I didn't want to.
I think it's fine.
Okay, I didn't want to speak out of turn.
Formation stage, you know, so we're still accepting invites. Somebody could back out, I suppose, at this point. Like, we haven't set a first meeting, but yeah, just yesterday he accepted. So.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Yes. And so we're very excited for that connection. We are very excited for that connection. So that will be a direct line, and our committee members will, have first updates of anytime we're, opening public input or having a booth, the community fair, things like that. And I would also say that this is a very important program for the county. So it will be foremost in the county communications. So our social media, we have a monthly public newsletter. It's pretty reader friendly. It's not very long. We have some good sound bites in there, and ways that you can learn more if it's something you're interested in. So I would also say that those could be for members of the general public. Those could also be really good ways to lean into the process if you're interested.
And then the web presence too. There'll be a website that has all the events and the hotline number, and we'll have stickers, and we'll be inundating hopefully everyone in the county. I mean, really our goal is to reach everybody. So I think it'll be hard for you to know about all the advantages.
And we should have, just one more note on the website. We did have a meeting with our web team actually just maybe this week. And we will have I don't know if you've ever been to the county website. We're updating it, and our county web team is amazing, but it doesn't have a lot of interaction opportunities at the moment. But we will be having actually a GIS story map if anyone's ever interacted with that. And that is what we will use for our engagement tool online for the open space plan, at least temporarily until the plan is then developed. So it should be very visual, and maps and views of the county and ways to give your input as well. So, and there was a question in the back, I'm sorry. So the question was, how will we approach land use and preservation, whether it will be acquisition or approaching landowners, about conservation and what that will look like. Did that summarize it? Or how will we decide which spaces are priorities? And so I think a lot of that is going to be determined through our conversations with the community. Yes, I do think we're seeking input on what are the spaces that we should be seeking to prioritize, but what do we want to do with it? We have really rich agricultural land in the county. We have really strong desires for recreation, but not a great amount of recreation availability in the county, in the unincorporated areas. So we're looking at things like trails, or the opportunity for trails, if people say that's what they're excited about. So I think that, what and where is what we want to learn from the community. How, I think, will be a very multifaceted approach. I think there's opportunity for acquisition, but if landowners are open to the idea of conservation easements, that's also something that we want to support and help them in. So I think it's not one or the other. It's a very multifaceted partnered approach that we anticipate to take toward how we can work together on land in the county.
I think Dina had a question in Zoom land. They raise their hand. Oh, Monarch Watch as a resource.
Thank you. Yes. Well, Thank you for offering that. Love it. We'll definitely do.
I mean, I think one of the challenges, and actually we have quite a few young people in the audience, is like, you know, you had youth as one of your groups.
Yes.
And particularly, I would say for Lawrence, not necessarily for the county at large, you have people that are living here for 4, 5, 6 years, sometimes longer, sometimes they want to stay here. So maybe if you guys have thought about that, or how you engage that group, or the degree to which you can get them excited or thinking about. I mean, I don't know, maybe you guys can just talk about, like,
Yeah.
what do you want out of a county? Do you want places that you can go hike that are close by? Do you want, you know, do you want the opportunity? You know, those are important voices to have for the county, even though you guys may just be here, you know, temporarily.
Great. That's a great question. And for anyone on Zoom, the question was kind of to the group gathered here today of what do youth or anyone want to see in availability in the county, potentially for recreation or areas to visit.
Cultural, there's all kinds
yeah, cultural, historic sites. Is that exciting?
I mean, does anybody even know where they can get? Yeah, go ahead.
I have been a senior, so it's kind of fourth year here.
Yeah, so great comment in the room about being able to hike and enjoying going to other places to do that. The Kanza, for example, but what if we had that right here? Yeah.
So that brings up for me a thought, which is oftentimes young people who are super busy and focus on whatever they're.
So question being, how do we make sure that busy people of all kinds, but maybe particularly youth or college students, how do we make sure that they're participating in the process, and not just people who maybe getting a newsletter or having time to do that? And I want to ask you guys, I'm so glad you're here today to learn about this, but how do you get your information? What gets you excited?
I'm not in college anymore, but if someone were to come into a classroom and I don't want to say force a survey on you, but if you could link up with professors or teachers and make it where it's like you come in for the first 5 or 10 minutes of class and you give a little spiel and then you hand out a survey, or that could just be like a QR code to an electronic survey or something, and that could get the input. I don't know if that would generate any sort of long-term engagement, but
Sure. I saw a hand back here as well.
I don't know, groups, because I'm part of a lot of environmentally focused groups.
No, definitely.
So if you haven't considered that, I would certainly recommend that we've done that.
And
Thank
those that
you.
get enthusiastic may get drawn into being part of this process beyond their college years, right? Like,
Yeah.
wanting to get a job in that field.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, like seeing how decisions are really made in government, and in the complexity of community input and values of a diverse community as wide as a county. I mean, stuff I would have welcome to learn in college. Yeah. Great ideas. 2 hands in the back. Yeah.
I was just going to touch on that subject. I know that I'm in the business school, but right now I'm involved.
Yeah, that's great. What's the organization?
I'm at the CCC, Children's Community Center.
Oh, okay.
Well, what's the class?
Fantastic.
Entrepreneurship for youth Charlotte.
Okay. So it
Oh,
sounds like there's a lot of
Charlotte.
flexibility
Nice.
in that class to be like, hey, we're going to take 4 weeks and do something. Yeah, that's cool.
So I think there's going to be, so timeline, it will be the next probably 16 months or so to final adoption. But because this isn't necessarily like an exact regulation or an exact code on something, I think there will be rich opportunities for implementation and some student learning and class engagement through that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Yes.
Yeah. Say that you engaged.
Yeah, wonderful. Great question. So the question was, do we plan to engage with the Indigenous community, the robust Indigenous community in Douglas County? And I know it is our intent to have that representation on our advisory committee. We're still seeking the right contact, but that's not a standalone. Through our continued engagement process, I know that we'll keep that top of mind and priority.
I mean, something that strikes me as a relatively low-hanging fruit is that I find, maybe this is because my wife does front-end design for webs, but if you don't make responsive websites that can be viewed on mobile, then you actually can lose a huge number of people, because as soon as they go to the mobile site, and frankly, I find but people, when they're driving around in rural areas, are probably not got their computer. They're probably on their phone, but also I feel like young people look at just a lot more stuff on mobile. They're not going to bust out computers. And so I do think that that's like a pretty important aspect. I think,
yeah,
make sure you can pull it up easily on your phone.
And luckily we've gotten to test the story map concept with our climate plan engagement over the last 2 years and troubleshootings, and it will be the same platform, and we've gotten to troubleshoot the mobile savviness of it. So I think we'll be well prepared for that.
I mean, what about like in England where you can like hike through anywhere? Like there's a rule, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about? You can like basically walk through people's property as long as you're just walking through.
A lot of European countries.
Yeah.
All the Nordic countries are like
that. I'm just thinking like landowners may not want to put their whole property into a conservation easement.
Totally.
But from a hiking trail perspective, they may be willing to have people walk through their property as long as they're not liable for what happened,
Yeah.
Which I think is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And we're seeing these, as I mentioned, very early on about, us being invited to this landowner's property to take, and it was a kind of a quaint little loop, but we got to see where the pawpaws were and like where a flood had come through at the creek that was there. And so I think it's a well-kept secret by this landowner, but it was, I think, kind of a grassroots, if you call it, effort of like, I want to share this. Yeah.
Well, working, certainly with KBS and, like the Baldwin Woods complex and other things like that are going to have to be, they're on the inventory, right? And there's going to be pieces of this.
Yes.
So I think KBS is trying to figure out how to deal with having more people that could come there from a public perspective and not just march all over the research areas.
Yeah. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? Capacity is an issue.
Yeah.
And we saw we have 2 public areas that the county maintains, Wells Overlook and Lone Star Lake. And we saw during the pandemic that, people just wanted to get outside. They wanted to be safe. They wanted to connect with nature. And the maintenance and the upkeep it was not something that the county was resourced or prepared for. It was almost like people were like, these things are in our community, let's go. And so just recognizing that, well, this is really important. Well, I mean, we want to hear more from the community, but already seeing evidence that it's really important, and maybe we don't have enough spaces like this for the community to go. What else can I tell you guys?
I mean, I think scarcity of places to go is like, for most people when they come to Kansas, they're like, there's not a national park right next door, right? It's like, you want to drive to Tallgrass Prairie or Konza or something like that. But so I think that there are places though in our county.
There
are places like Wells Overlook and Lone Star Lake and stuff like that. I feel like I knew about those until I've been here for like 5 years.
Right. Yes.
So I'm really interested in how to talk about this and talk about what most people want. And we have this huge urban rural split in the county.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I see is that there's a lot of people in the urban areas who want these things, and there's a lot of people in the rural areas who want something different. And what are you hearing so far? I realize you're in the early stages, but are you getting any pushback from the rural communities about this idea of an open space plan, or is it too soon to really know how the rural people feel about it, which is in a lot of ways, where the open space is.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it's a little too soon. But I think we are prepared or need to prepare ourselves for a lot of different values to come to this conversation. And that's why we want our process to be open-minded to different uses, agriculture, recreation, or just preservation and appreciation. That it's not one goal that we're looking at. So it's a great question. I think we're just gonna have to go into it really open-minded and see how it goes.
I think an aspect of that is not letting one particular question overwhelm the entire process. I mean,
Yeah.
what we're seeing right now,
Yeah.
like wind and solar energy in the county and the development of that on property lands, that can take over the entire conversation
Could.
about open spaces, but that's really not, I mean, that's maybe a component of it, but it's certainly not the entire conversation by any measure.
Yes. And I think also helping people to, at least one tool in my experience that can be helpful is helping people to connect to where they can give the input that they feel most passionate about. And it might not be this particular process. You know, if you, just for an example, if utility is, you know, if a planning regulation is the passion that people are bringing to a conversation, they really want to be heard, and hearing them and appreciating what they're bringing, but also, you know, navigating government input is not always entirely clear. So if there's you know, also just being available to offer them the avenue where their input also could have impact as well. Yes.
So Kansas in general has been cutting back on conservation at the state level for a very long time. And there are states like Missouri who have very, very well-funded conservation programs. Do you see this need for conservation in Douglas County spilling over to the state level at all and having any kind of impact on the need for overall Kansas needing to better address conservation issues? That's a bigger question, I know.
Yeah.
It seems like if an entire county is value on conservation, then the state might.
I think that's a really important question to have in mind. And in fact, we got a question from the commission on Wednesday night about what other communities in Kansas could we point to that were doing this. And Johnson County came up because they actually did a lot of forward-thinking into their perks plan. But there weren't a lot of examples. We were calling on Iowa and some of their robust open space planning. And so I think in this way, Douglas County could be a leader and it could start a conversation. I haven't thought that broadly yet, but I think it's a great thing to have on our radar.
No, I was just thinking a little bit more though about the divergent views. Yeah, I think there's two ways you can go about it for you guys. You can collect information from rural people and from urban people, and then you can like try and find a happy medium yourselves, which is probably impossible if not really difficult. But I think there's value in making sure that you have all of those people in the same room consistently, because it shouldn't be you guys mediating these different opinions. It should be them hearing that people have different opinions that live in the same county as them.
Yeah.
Even if it's contentious, right? Like even if I think that conversation, you know, just even for example, being on the Douglas County Food Policy Council as a person that lives in Lawrence, hearing, you know, where I'm like composting should be a thing in Lawrence. Well, it seems like obvious, but like at scale in rural areas, composting is a completely different animal. Mm-hmm. And so like having those conversations in the same room are really important.
Yeah. And
sorry, that wasn't really a question.
No.
You guys shouldn't have to take the separate opinions and like somehow incorporate them. It's let those separate opinions play out.
I think
in a room together.
No, I think that was it's a very appropriate comment because, or rather well-timed comment, because I think and this probably happens all the time, but we're noticing, especially because we do have some very controversial and very important things happening in our community, that people tend to show up when they're against something. and people don't show up when they're for something. Not to say they don't, I'm generalizing. Obviously, I'm making a general statement, but it does become challenging for the decision makers and the staff when we're not getting an engagement on all sides. People are more apt to, in our experience, more apt to get upset when it's something they don't want, but not to get excited when it's something that they really do want.
So that makes me wonder if there's a way to channel some of the anger about wind and solar in the county to something more productive fitting in with what you're doing with open space plan. If there's some way to, those people that don't want wind turbines in their neighborhoods value open space. And if there's a way to give them something or to say, okay, if you don't want this here, how about this other thing, open space? You don't want wind and solar, utility scale wind and solar. How about this other thing, open space? And formalize some kind of, and I recognize a lot of that mostly out in the county, there's this belief that we are by ourselves protecting open space, but I think there's also this underlying understanding that those people who are living out of the land are not going to live forever. And so if they want their open space values to be maintained for generations, how can they work through this process to perhaps addressing those issues that are
Yeah, and we'll see some competing values over that for sure. Local versus global and local versus national. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting and challenging, and I hope in the end create a really good guide and map for our community.